in the Be Bold, Wisconsin study. The first presentation will be about Indiana, and their Secretary of Commerce is here to talk about that. Then later on this afternoon, we have the Kansas model for their innovation for Kansas Bioscience Authority. After that, we have a candidate for governor. Candidate Scott Walker will be here at 3 o'clock. Just want to make you all aware that we have had numerous invitations and correspondence with the Barrett campaign. Right now, I believe Vice President Biden is in Wisconsin, and very definitely that is taking the attention of candidate Barrett. So as of right now, we do not have a dedicated time. We're hoping that he will be here tomorrow, but it's very unlikely that he will be. So I just want to make sure that you realize that we very definitely have been trying to get both candidates for governor here, but we are in constant contact with them related to the Be Bold study and the recommendations as was mentioned this morning. Now, it's my privilege to introduce the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Indiana. He is Chief Executive Officer of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. As Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Roob is a member of Governor Mitchell Daniels' cabinet and leads the state's economic development efforts. Under his leadership, the IEDC secured 160 decisions by companies to locate an estimated 19,955 new jobs in the state in 2009, and in 2010 they are on that same pace. So without any further ado, I would turn it over to Secretary of Commerce, Mitchell Roob.
And thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks for the invitation. I was on the road up here this morning. I talked to my daughter, who was home from school. She's got on fall break, and she asked me where I was going. I told her I was going to Wisconsin, and she said, "Well, Daddy, please, when you get up there, don't tell any jokes because you're not very funny." And then and then she said, "And don't wear orange because they'll think you're from Illinois." So I do want to just spend a couple minutes talking about what IEDC does and kind of how it's organized. But before I do that, I thought it might be helpful to put in context a little bit about kind of where the state of Indiana was when we went down the path. This was working, honestly. Kind of put in context where the state of Indiana was before we took office. So we were candidly a failed state. Here you go, thanks. It works now. We were candidly a failed state. While the rest of the Midwest and America was thriving in the early part of this decade, Indiana had sunk into a funk from which it did not seem to be emerging. A group of us got together in early 2001 and concluded that we would take one last best chance to what we called the one last best chance to change the state of Indiana. And if we failed, we would move because we weren't going to live in a failed state. And so part of that effort was to create something called the Indiana Economic Development Corporation that really changed the state's focus on economic development from one of capacity building and discussing workforce and having conversations about the importance of infrastructure to actually doing something, where we would aggressively change the business climate in the state of Indiana and then spend several years selling that business climate across the United States and throughout the globe. And that's what we have been about over the course of the last several years. So IEDC is a transactional organization. You'll see I have a slide on this in a little bit. We do deals. And we do nothing but deals. There are other people in the state government that used to respond to the old Department of Commerce that are responsible for what would be referred to as capacity building, for doing CDBG or doing the energy grants or some amount of regulation. All right, none of that stuff crosses my desk unless it involves a transaction. So that was one of the changes that we made. But the biggest change that we made was that we elected a governor who was single-purposely focused on increasing the quantity and quality of jobs in the state of Indiana. Everything that all of our agencies do is focused on that single outcome. That is the single indicia of success for our agency, not just for our agency, but for the Daniels administration. So let me again talk a little bit about where we were. When Mitch Daniels took office in 2005, we were in the red, while most states in the union were in the black, and figuring out new things to do with this load of tax money that the robust economy of the late 90s and early part of this century was creating. We were constraining spending. So aggregate spending in real dollars went up very little in the state of Indiana. Very little in the state of Indiana. While other states saw double-digit increases in tax revenue and in spending, we did not do that. We were very conscious of maintaining a frugal budget, and in doing so, we inadvertently, because let's face it, no one really expected the bottom to fall out of the economy the way it has in late 2008, or did in 2008, and remains out. We've positioned ourselves as a state in a much better fiscal condition than surrounding states. Let me see if I can go back there. So that has allowed us to really go while everybody else has gone from solvency to bankruptcy, we've gone from bankruptcy to solvency. And very frankly, and people ask the governor, well, how did you do that? How did you do that? And it's pretty simple. We spent less than we took in. All right? No, that's the governor's line. No, she doesn't necessarily believe in spending. My daughter doesn't necessarily believe in spending less than you take in, but the governor does. That's a witty thing to say, but it takes a fair amount of political gumption to actually do that. By the way, I ran Medicaid for the first 4 years of the administration and Human Services, so I know a bit about the difficulties of constraining budgets at any point in time. So we also, during that period of time, in the last several years, we had not seen much job growth in the state of Indiana. Our Department of Commerce was not a single-focused agency. They spent a lot of time on a lot of different issues, wrote a lot of reports. They had 16 offices around the state and helped people with small businesses and helped people with insulating their homes. All these are wonderful things to do, but it wasn't about bringing new jobs to the state of Indiana. And so when Mitch Daniels became the governor, we really focused on competitive deals. And as you can see from that chart, our deal volume and our job volume increased substantially as a result of that effort. But we didn't do that simply by changing the way the Department of Commerce operated into the into the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. We really did that by changing a number of things in the state of Indiana in terms of what our business climate was. Because one of the things that we found, if you look back on this slide here, so far this year, and I've got a slide that'll come up later, that we've done about 150 deals this year. And we'll probably do 200 for the course of the year. Of those competitive deals, we competed overseas, exclusively with overseas locations, for 30 of those transactions.